She was on her knees scrubbing his marble floors when he told her to get out of his building and never come back. 3 months later, he was on his knees asking her to be his wife. Neither of them survived it the same. Adanna Osei had been cleaning the 42nd floor of Hargrove Tower for 11 months before Adrian Hargrove noticed she existed. That was, she would later say, the first warning sign, not that he noticed her, but how. He had walked past her every morning for almost a year, past her cart of supplies, past the smell of the lemon cleaner she used on the lobby tiles, past her in her gray uniform with the small Hargrove Facilities patch on the left sleeve. He had looked through her the way people look through glass, aware of its presence only when it gives them trouble. The morning he noticed her, she had given him trouble. She had been mopping the corridor outside the executive boardroom at 7:14 a.m., early, because the board meeting was at 8 and she needed the floor dry before the men in expensive shoes arrived to ruin it. She had her earbuds in. She was listening to a podcast about the history of the Asante Empire, something she did every morning to make the hours feel less like hours, and she was not paying attention to the elevator when it opened behind her, and so she did not move the wet floor sign in time, and Adrian Hargrove, 38 years old, CEO of Hargrove Capital, stepped off the elevator, hit the damp tiles at a pace designed for a dry floor, and went down. Not all the way down. He caught himself on the wall. But his coffee did not catch itself. It went wide, arced beautifully in the fluorescent light, and landed across the front of his white shirt in a pattern that was, objectively, quite thorough. She had pulled her earbud out. He had straightened. Their eyes had met across 18 inches of wet marble. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I had the sign." "Where's your supervisor?" he said. His voice was not raised. That was the thing she would remember. He had the particular coldness of a man who had learned that volume was for people who lacked authority. She called Benga. Benga came. Adrian spoke to Benga for 4 minutes, while Adanna stood to the side with her mop handle held vertical like a flag with nothing to say. She heard the words gross negligence and liability, and not the standard I expect in this building. She heard Benga apologize in the plural. "We apologize, we take full responsibility," as though Adanna's mistake belonged to everyone. She watched Adrian Hargrove's jaw work through controlled displeasure and thought, with a clarity that surprised her. He has never once done anything that required cleaning up after himself. She was let go that afternoon. 11 months of early mornings, of learning which executives took their coffee before 8 and which ones needed 20 minutes before they were human. 11 months, and it ended in a typed email from HR and a final pay envelope slipped under the locker room door. She did not cry until she was on the train home. She cried not for the job, exactly. She had held worse ones, and she had plans, and she was 3 semesters from finishing the finance degree she'd been pursuing at night. But because 11 months is a long time to invest in a place, and it takes something from you when a place turns out to have never known you were there. What Adanna did not know, sitting on the eastbound train with her uniform folded in her bag, was that Adrian Hargrove had gone home that evening and stood in his shower for 25 minutes thinking about the expression on her face when he spoke to her supervisor instead of to her. He had not been able to name what he was feeling. He told himself he was reviewing the incident for liability purposes. He told himself this was a management matter and he had handled it correctly. He told himself the coffee stain was gone, the shirt was in the laundry, the floor was probably dry by now. He stood in the shower for 25 minutes. His assistant Elena noticed the next morning that he was short with her in a way that was different from his usual precision. There was something else in it. When he asked, 4 days later, to review the termination from the cleaning staff, casually, between 2 other agenda items, she pulled the file and handed it over without comment. He looked at the name for a long time. Adanna Osei, 26. 1 prior formal review in 11 months, and that had been a commendation from the facilities director for flagging a water leak that would have cost the building $40,000 in damage. He read the commendation twice. He read the termination notice. He set the file down and looked at the window. "Find out if she's been re-employed," he said. "In what capacity?" Elena asked. He paused. "Any capacity," he said. She had not been re-employed. She was 3 weeks into her severance and had applied to 7 positions and had so far received 2 auto-generated rejections and 5 silences. Elena reported this. Adrian nodded. Elena waited. "Offer her the position," he said. "Which position?" A pause that was just long enough to be revealing. Junior analyst. Finance division. She's finishing a degree, look up her transcripts. Elena looked up her transcripts. She brought them back. He looked at them and said nothing for a moment, and Elena, who had learned to read his silences like a second language, understood something was shifting in her employer that she would need to watch carefully. Adanna received the call on a Tuesday at noon. She was in her apartment eating jollof rice and studying for a corporate finance exam. The number was a Hargrove Capital extension. She stared at it for 2 rings before answering. Ms. Osei. It was his voice. This is Adrian Hargrove. She set her fork down. I know, she said. He offered her the position. He did it without ceremony, without explanation of the reasoning, without any of the framing that might have made it easier to receive. He stated the salary. He stated the start date. He said he hoped she would accept. She was quiet for a moment that probably felt longer on both ends. Why? She said. Another silence. She would learn, later, that his silences were not evasions. He was actually thinking, and he refused to speak before he'd finished. Because the termination was not proportionate to what happened, he said. And because your record suggests we made a mistake. The record I had when you had my supervisor called, she said. Yes. She let that sit between them. I'll think about it, she said. She accepted the next morning. Not because she had forgiven him, she hadn't decided what she thought about forgiveness yet, but because the salary was real and the opportunity was real and she had learned, through a childhood that did not give her the luxury of pride over practicality, that you take the real things when they're offered. She started on a Monday. She was good at the work. This was not a surprise to her, though she suspected it was something of a surprise to the 3 men in her cohort who had taken one look at her on day 1 and made their assessments. She was precise with numbers, patient with models, unafraid of asking questions that revealed she didn't know something, a quality she had found that more confident people rarely had. Within 6 weeks, her division manager had flagged her to his senior director. Within 10 weeks, the senior director had flagged her to Elena. Elena put the flag on Adrian's desk with her morning briefing. He read it at 7:30 a.m. He did not comment on it. He did not have to. They were in the same building now. This was a fact they both moved around carefully for the first 3 months, like 2 people sharing a kitchen who are being deliberate about not reaching for the same drawer at the same time. He saw her in the elevator occasionally. He said good morning. She said good morning. They both looked at the floor numbers. The first real conversation happened at 11 p.m. on a Thursday when she was the last person left in the analyst pool, and he walked through on his way back from a call and stopped because the lights were still on and he needed to know why. The Meridian model is wrong, she said, without looking up. Someone ran the sensitivity analysis on last year's interest rate assumptions. It's off by enough to matter. He came to stand behind her. She did not move. He looked at the screen, at the numbers, at the error she had flagged in red. How long have you been here? He said. Since 7. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Show me, he said. She showed him. It took 40 minutes. He asked questions that told her he understood what she was showing him, and she answered them without softening the implications, which were not flattering to the team that had built the model. At 11:52 p.m. he said, "You should have been on this team from the start," and she looked at him for the first time that evening and said, "Yes, I should have," and the double meaning sat between them without either of them touching it. He drove her home. She didn't ask him to. He simply said his car was downstairs and the trains were reduced at that hour. She accepted because it was midnight and practical, and she had already decided she would not make things complicated by treating ordinary things as if they carried more weight than they did. They were in the car for 20 minutes. He asked about her degree. She told him about it. He asked about Accra, where she'd grown up. She told him about that too. Carefully, the way you describe somewhere beloved to someone you're not sure has the capacity to understand it. He listened. This surprised her. She had not expected him to listen the way he did. Not politely, not while constructing his next sentence, but actually listening. His face turned slightly toward her in the dark of the car. "You should go back," he said. "Someday." "I will," she said. "When I have something worth bringing back." He said nothing to that. But she felt him thinking. This was in November. By January, they were having dinner. The first time was framed as a working dinner, which they both understood was a fiction but found useful, a container for something that didn't have a name yet. By the third dinner it had a name, though neither of them said it. By February, they were in love. Adanna would not have used that word yet. Adrian would not have used any word. He processed things slowly, thoroughly, without announcing himself until he was certain. But they were in it. The dinner became a habit. The habit became necessity. The necessity became, on an evening in early March when she said something that made him laugh. Properly laugh, the unguarded kind. A thing they both stopped pretending was anything other than what it was. There was one evening in February that she would think about for the rest of her life. They had been at his apartment, not for dinner, not framed as anything, just there, because it had become natural to be there, the way water becomes natural to a vessel that holds it long enough. She had been reading on the couch with her shoes off. He had been at his desk with spreadsheets she wasn't supposed to see. Soft rain against the window. A lamp on. The ordinary miracle of two people comfortable enough to be quiet together without filling the quiet with performance. He had looked up from his work at one point and looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that thinks it isn't being noticed. She had noticed. She had pretended not to, which was a kindness, because some moments need to complete themselves at their own pace. Later, when she was pulling on her coat to leave, he had come to stand near the door and said very quietly, "I don't want you to go." Not as a request. Just as a true thing, stated plainly, the way he stated true things. She had looked at him. "Then I'll stay," she said. And that was it. Not romantic in any way the movies would recognize. No music, no rain-soaked confession, no moment designed to be remembered. Just two people telling each other the truth in the hallway by a coat rack, which is where most of the real things happen. He told her he loved her first. He told her badly, sitting across from her in a restaurant 3 weeks later, setting his fork down with more deliberateness than the moment required, looking at her with the expression of a man who has run the numbers and keeps arriving at an answer that surprises him. "I want to marry you," he said. She stared at him. "We've been seeing each other for 2 months." "I know. You don't know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know how you work. I know what you're willing to hold and what you're not. I know what you looked like when I spoke to your supervisor instead of to you." He stopped. "I know that I have been thinking about that for 6 months and I'm tired of the thinking and I want to do something about it." She was quiet for a long moment. Around them the restaurant moved through its ordinary rhythms. Glasses, cutlery, other people's laughter. "You know this would destroy you," she said. He didn't flinch. "Elaborate." She set down her own fork. "You're bored. You're investors. The Meridian deal alone. The Kessler family has 52% of that consortium, and you know exactly what Raymond Kessler said at the shareholder dinner in October. I was not in the room, but Elena was. And Elena told me, because Elena is the only honest person in that building besides me." He said nothing. "You'd lose the deal," she said. "Possibly 2 others behind it. Raymond Kessler would move against you at the next board meeting, and he has the votes. You would lose the company." A silence. Not the thinking kind. The confirming kind. The silence of a man who has already done the arithmetic and does not need to do it again. "Yes," he said. She felt something shift in her chest. Not love, she already had that, but something else. Something that frightened her more because she had not expected it. "You already know that," she said. "Yes. And you're asking anyway." "Yes." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about who she had been on the floor of the 42nd corridor with her mop handle and her podcast about the Asante Empire. She thought about what it cost to love a person who had first looked through you like glass. She thought about what it meant that he was sitting here choosing her over a company that was, in every way the world measured things, more valuable. She thought about whether that made him brave or reckless, and whether those were even different things when you were in love. "I need time," she said. "You have time," he said. He picked up his fork. "As much as you need." What happened next happened faster than either of them had planned. A photograph, taken by someone at the restaurant, sold by someone who needed the money, appeared in the financial press on a Friday morning. Adrian Hargrove and an employee, the caption said. An employee. The headline was not kind. By noon, Raymond Kessler had called an emergency board meeting. By 3 o'clock, Adrian's general counsel was on the phone with words like conflict of interest and fiduciary exposure and the board's position. Adanna heard about it from Elena at 3:47 p.m. She was at her desk. She read the article on her phone. She read the board's statement. She read, with very careful eyes, the quotes from two unnamed senior executives who used phrases like questions of judgment and the integrity of leadership, which was the corporate language of men who wanted to destroy someone without appearing to want anything at all. She thought about what it meant that none of them had put their name to it. She thought about Raymond Kessler, whom she had met once. A firm handshake, eyes that assessed and filed and moved on, a smile that did not reach high enough to be real. She thought about the 52% and what that kind of leverage teaches a person about power. It teaches you that power is not about being stronger. It is about making someone choose between two things they cannot afford to lose, then watching which one they drop. Raymond Kessler was betting Adrian would drop her. She sat for a moment with her hands flat on the desk and her eyes very still, and then she stood up, got her coat, and walked to the elevator. She went to his office. She knocked and opened the door. He was on the phone. He saw her. Something moved across his face. Relief, she thought, though she wasn't sure she understood why. He ended the call. They're moving against you, she said. Yes. You could stop it, she said. If you tell them it was nothing. A dinner. An error in judgment. You could call it that and they'd have no ground. He looked at her. Is that what you want me to do? She stood in the middle of his office. His enormous 42nd floor office with its view of a city that had cost him everything he had and had given him everything he thought he wanted, and she thought about what she was willing to be. About what it cost to ask a person to call you an error in judgment. About what it meant that he was looking at her like that, like she was the thing he was choosing, not the company he was losing. No, she said. That's not what I want. He stood. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her, and for a moment they were close enough that she could see the exact particular exhaustion of a man who has been fighting for 20 years and has finally found something he's willing to stop fighting for. Then what? He said. She took a breath. I want you to let them take it, she said. And I want you to take me home. He looked at her for a long time. The city moved behind the glass. Far below them, the building he'd built carried on its life without asking his permission. You're sure, he said. She thought about the train ride home 11 months ago with her uniform in her bag. She thought about the cold November car ride and the restaurant and the fork he'd set down with too much deliberateness. She thought about what it meant to be chosen by someone who understood exactly what it cost them. Yes, she said. I'm sure. He took her hand. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Raymond Kessler got the company. The board voted 14-3. Adrian Hargrove left the building for the last time on a Tuesday in April with a box and a brief statement to the press that said nothing except that he wished the company well. He held Adanna's hand in the taxi. She held his back. He did not look at the building as they drove away. She did. She looked at it for a long time. The glass face of it, the lobby she had scrubbed on her knees at 7 a.m., the 42nd floor where she had found the error in someone else's numbers and been seen for the first time by a man who had previously looked through her like glass. She looked at it and felt something that she did not immediately have a word for. Not grief. Not triumph. Something in between, the feeling of a door that has closed properly for the first time and will not open again, which is sometimes a loss and sometimes the point. He was watching her watch the building. You all right? He said. She turned back to him. Yes, she said. Are you? He thought about it, which she appreciated. The fact that he never gave the reflexive answer, the performed fine. He looked at his hands, then at her and said, I think so. Ask me in a year. She laughed. He looked surprised by the laugh, then grateful for it. She took his hand again and they rode the rest of the way in silence that was not the careful kind. Not the navigating kind, but the kind that only exists between people who have stopped performing for each other. She finished her degree in May. She graduated on a Thursday afternoon with her mother in the audience, flown in from Accra, and Adrian, which was both awkward and exactly right. Her mother shook his hand after, assessed him with a thorough economy of a woman who has survived a great many things, and said to Adanna in Chui, "He looks at you the way your father looked at me." Then she changed the subject and never mentioned it again. He started a new fund in September. Smaller, quieter, built on relationships rather than leverage, on the kind of patient capital that doesn't require someone to bleed for its returns. It took time. Some things do. He was, Adanna observed in those early months, a better version of the man who had walked off the elevator and demanded to speak to her supervisor. Not softer, not diminished, but excavated somehow, the hard shell of pure ambition cracked open enough to let other things in. She joined him. Not immediately, not as a gesture of solidarity, but because a year into her analyst career she had learned enough to see that the most interesting problems in finance were not the ones being solved by the largest firms, and because she had always worked best alongside someone who asked questions that required real answers. They built it together. It was difficult, and then it wasn't, and then it was again, the way everything real alternates between those states. They married the following spring. The ceremony was in Accra, because she had said she wanted to go back when she had something worth bringing, and she had. Not money, not a title, not the resume that now surprised people when they saw it, but something quieter and more durable. A version of herself that had been tested. A person beside her who knew what it cost him to choose her and had chosen her anyway, not once but continuously, in the small daily ways that matter more than any single dramatic moment. The photograph from the restaurant ended up framed in their hallway. Not prominently, just there, halfway down, between a landscape and a mirror. Visitors sometimes asked about it. She would look at it and say, "That's the night everything cost something." And then she would walk into the kitchen, and he would be there, making tea badly, the way he always did, and the city outside would do what cities do, and the cost would be exactly what it was. Nothing more, nothing less, and entirely worth it. Ask yourself this and sit with it. Is the love that demands nothing from you really love at all, or just comfort wearing love's clothes? If this story moved you, drop a comment below and tell us which moment you felt most. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and leave a like. Stories like this only reach the people who need them when you help carry them there.